Hi, thanks for inviting me into your world today. By the time you finish this podcast, you'll have a greater respect for that little bit of unique oak tree bark we call cork. Let's venture out on the wine road. If you're a frequent wine drinker, it's most likely you've come across a bottle that's been affected by trichloroanisole, or TCA, or more commonly known as cork taint. It's what can give wine that musty aroma and a flavor like a dirty old rag has been soaking in the wine. That's not appealing. Now, if you've been drinking wine for at least 20 years, you may have noticed the instances of finding a cork-tainted bottle have been fewer over the last 10 years or so. That is primarily due to the work of the Cork Quality Council and their relationship with ETS Laboratories. I met with Peter Weber of the Council at the St. Helena lab of ETS a couple of weeks ago to learn more about cork. I knew a few things, but doing research for this interview, I learned so much more about the impressive qualities of cork. Dr. Eric Hervé showed me around the laboratory at ETS, and it is amazing the intricate research they are doing to discover and eliminate TCA in cork. And if you like to geek out over laboratories, you can see a video with Dr. Hervé and some pictures of the laboratory on my website, onthewineroad.com. The Cork Quality Council uses the GC-MS gas chromatograph with mass spectrometer detection. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. These machines detect TCA at levels below sensory thresholds. The Council has worked with Dr. Hervé and ETS Laboratories to develop this method, and it's now the world standard for measuring TCA. And Cork Quality Council member companies run about 30,000 samples a year through this analysis, which explains why now less than 1% of wine bottles are affected by TCA. After the tour of the laboratory, I said to Peter, "It is amazing the detailed work they are doing there."
Yes, they're a great outfit, and we've been working with them since 1998, working on ways to improve cork, and they've been tremendous for us, and they've responded to everything we've ever needed, and it's a great partnership, great people.
And yet, interestingly, cork is a natural product, so you're getting something that's natural, making it better, but it still retains its natural quality.
Absolutely. The only thing we're really doing here is trying to find a more reliable and more efficient way to duplicate the human nose.
And it's gotten better, I saw, since like 2002 with the research. It's gotten 95% better, which is hard to imagine because it was already just a small percentage.
Yes, indeed. It's been a tremendous improvement. Basically, we replaced our sensory analysis with a very precise chemical detection. So we learned not only what was a good bale of corks, we also learned what was an excellent bale of corks. And it allowed us to really improve things and find that some of our suppliers need to be replaced and some needed to be encouraged to sell more.
Some applauded and some slapped on the wrist, huh?
Yes, and it allowed for some very rapid improvements. And since then, the same type of equipment and the same methods that the people at ETS worked out are utilized throughout Europe. And so it's being used before they receive wood in from the forest, and it's helped quite a bit. I know that the first time we started using this, we could see some detectable TCA in almost every sheet of reports that came out. There's usually about 50 different reports. And I remember the first time I saw a page that absolutely had zero TCA, I got in my car and I drove out to the cork company. I wanted to make sure they were performing the test properly. Yeah. Now we'll go weeks without seeing any hits of TCA, so wow. It's really much better.
And when did you say you got into this business? Was it the 90s?
Yes, I think I started in 1996 with the Cork Quality Council.
And the advancements were immediate, within the first number of years, and then now it's just kind of getting even more refined.
Yes, I think that when I started, the group agreed that they were going to spend some significant time and money trying to research this problem we were having with TCA, and it paid off very nicely. And we spend most of our time now trying to make sure that we can continue to improve, but also improve other things in the cork industry. We spend an awful lot of time trying to do education as well, because there's still a fair amount of misunderstanding about cork out there.
You mean in the consumer's mind or in the production side?
I think it's mostly in the consumer side. I hear people are afraid that they were running out of cork, which is not true. There's plenty of cork. And I hear people say that, some people think we're cutting down cork trees to make cork, which is absolutely not the case. Harvesting cork is one of the most sustainable industries around, and it's more like shearing a sheep. Every 9 years, we take the outer bark off of a tree, make cork from it, and 9 years later, it's back again.
Yeah, I wanted to go through some of these facts because there are some things I've known and I've also discussed on my show and some features I've done. That cork, for one, is an oak tree.
Yes.
The cork is more or less bark that's being pulled off the tree to be made into cork and broken down and compressed into corks for bottles. And the trees live upwards of 250 years. So I knew all that, but I didn't understand how cork forests have such a high level of biodiversity and second only to
To the Amazon rainforest.
That's what I've been told. I remember being contacted by a United Nations group, and they want to know what they could do to help preserve the cork forest. And I said, geez, I know about cork and wine. I didn't really know that much about how important the cork forest was. And indeed, they think it's primarily responsible for keeping the entire North Africa of becoming desert. Right now, there still are some savannas and greenery around the edges, mostly because they're protected by cork oaks that are protecting the soil.
Boy, who would have imagined that? What's even more astounding is cork forests act like a carbon sink or vacuum, sucking up almost 5 million tons of harmful CO2 out of the atmosphere each year.
Sure, and that's actually just Portugal. It's probably double that because the actual size of the cork forest is about 5 million acres, slightly up from that, and Portugal's about half. And the Portuguese did a fairly in-depth study on this, and that's where the 4.8 number came from. It's a large forest, and it's important, and it's in an area where it's not likely to be replaced by a forest if it were not there.
Where else can cork forests be found?
There's through the Iberian Peninsula, of course. Spain and Portugal are probably 70%, but you'll find cork trees almost all around the northern Mediterranean. They have cork forests in France, Italy, Sardinia, Algeria, Morocco, and I'm sure I'm probably left something out, but it kind of brings people together, and to some extent because they're different communities, but they have some of the same resources for the cork industry.
I'm surprised with the U.S. entrepreneurial spirit that there's no one. Has anyone tried to do that here in the States?
Well, I've heard stories. Cork oaks were actively planted, I'm told, in World War I and World War II. I think people were worried about a shortage of material for life vests. There are probably 40 or 50 cork oaks around UC Davis, and the trees grow magnificently here in California. They probably grow a little faster than they do in Portugal or Spain. The problem is it takes about 40 years before you can get any kind of commercial crop. And that's just really hard to sell to the bank, I think.
Right. I was going to say, we had the entrepreneurial spirit. We don't have the patience, right? Is that it?
Yes, the saying is that you grow vines for your children, but you grow cork trees for your grandchildren.
Oh, interesting. Well, the other thing about cork is the cork closures for wine and other bottles have the lowest carbon footprint, too, much better than the synthetic and screw caps that are out there.
Well, sure, they would even by themselves, but when you factor in the carbon sink value of the forest, it's a monumental difference. And the people who are keeping track of their sustainability and their carbon footprint in Europe, I know that the OIV has encouraged them to take into consideration that carbon sink value, so you can actually lower your winery's carbon footprint by using cork.
Oh, yeah. And more importantly, it's recyclable, sure, whereas screw caps and the synthetics are not at this point. And you can do so many things with cork after it's been used in a wine bottle.
Yes, it's been a very robust movement, the cork recycling. I think I probably first saw it happening in an organized fashion in this country about 10 years ago. People are sending the reclaimed corks to people who create agglomerate from it. I've seen there's a company that makes shoes with them. There are people making the yoga blocks, and some of the cork just goes back into regular flooring materials and whatnot. And actually, there's some people that actually will take that ground cork, and they're using it on AstroTurf instead of the ground-up tires, and they're using it around playgrounds as well. So it's just a very valuable natural product.
I've seen it in recording studios, too, over my years in radio. It's a wonderful soundproofing material as well. And this caught my eye. Now they're saying it has highly effective anti-aging properties. So I understand Birkenstock is introducing a new skincare line of natural cork.
Well, I read that too. That's pretty recent. I'm not terribly surprised. They're using the Suberin, which is a wax that's very common in cork. It's actually the largest single component of cork, and Suberin is a really kind of an intelligent wax that ends up governing how the plant will absorb water or not absorb water or other chemicals. And it seems to, I'm not a chemist, and I obviously have not done much to stop aging for myself, but I would imagine that it's a very useful tool for those guys. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if you could put this cork product on your face and then every 10 years or so peel it off and you'd be 10 years younger.
Yeah. Well, that reminded me. I know when I first got this job, I was looking up the origins of cork, and I noticed something. In ancient Greece, there was a guy who said that cork could be a cure for baldness, and he would burn cork and take the black smudge and mix it with olive oil and put it on his head. I've never tried it. Maybe should have, but didn't.
I'm not going to comment about your head.
Thank you.
Peter Weber of the Cork Quality Council. We were discussing recycling of cork earlier, and you can keep and return your bags of cork to a number of wineries around the area. Just call ahead and ask. I know that Gloria Ferrer Caves and Vineyards in Sonoma takes them. Or you can visit Cork Reharvest at corkforest.org or Recork at recork.org for more details on recycling. Up next, we'll find out what it is about cork that leads people to appreciate wine more when it's sealed with a cork, as On the Wine Road continues. Welcome back. I appreciate you sticking around through the commercials so I can make a buck or two. Now let's get back to cork. We've been discussing the many benefits and environmentally positive aspects of cork. Then there's the tradition of cork and the perception of quality that cork lends to a bottle of wine. Interestingly, Oxford University's Cross-Modal Research Laboratory did a study, and it turned out participants rated the same wine as 15% better quality when it was served from a bottle with a cork as opposed to a screw cap. The wine under a cork was also rated as more appropriate for a celebration, at 20% higher, and more inciting of a celebratory mood, at a 16% higher percentage. Yeah, nothing really compares to the sound of a popping cork. But can cork actually make wine taste better?
Well, that's a good question. I think that the most important thing is how the oxygen mixes with the wine, and the closure has something to do with that. And the cork is unlike any other closure because it's made up of little cells that contain air. And so when you compress that cork from 18 millimeters, it actually starts at 24 millimeters, and you compress it down to fit into an 18 millimeter wide bottle, you're creating high pressure oxygen inside the cork. And slowly over about 6 months, a small amount of oxygen, about 3 milliliters, will come into the wine. And that will supply some oxygen, which is going to help reduce the chances of having off aromas that sometimes occur with sulfides, and allow some of the different tannins and whatnot to develop. But the thing is, after that 3 milliliters is introduced, it stops because the cork is airtight. So it doesn't really breathe. It just kind of gives one breath. It takes a long time, but that's one breath. And frankly, the alternatives, they either don't let in any oxygen at all, or they try to let in some. That's one of the things they're doing now is they're trying to put in a permeable membrane. But unfortunately, if you've got a permeable membrane, it's going to be letting oxygen in forever at the same rate. So the cork it allows the oxygen to get a nice little dose of oxygen, and then it becomes airtight. So I think that really helps with the development of the wines.
In other words, it's ideal.
Exactly. Thank you.
Let me ask you this. I don't know if I'll use it or not, but I was amazed when my wife and I went to Burgundy, and we went down to some of the cellars where they had bottles from 1919 that were still on shelves and laying down and aging. And the woman told us that they'll replace the cork every so many years or decades. I imagine that's necessary. Surely the cork over a period of 50 years and more will start breaking down.
There is recorking. I'm not sure what the period of time is. To me, I think of it more like 30 or 40 years. And I unfortunately don't have any Burgundies that old in my cellar, so I can't really tell you what the end of life is, but hopefully I'll someday be able to find that out.
If he did have older Burgundies in his cellar, I certainly would have invited myself over as a drinking companion. Peter Weber of the Cork Quality Council. If you want to see what they're doing, visit corkqc.com. And for more interesting tidbits, visit 100%cork.org. That's the number 100, then %cork spelled out, .org. As far as today's show goes, it's time to put a cork in it. Sorry, I had to say it. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Stitcher, or another podcast provider, you can find more interviews and interesting content on my website, onthewineroad.com. I'm on Facebook as On the Wine Road, and Instagram and Twitter at JD Wine Road. If you'd like to join my wine community, look for me on Patreon. There I provide compelling tidbits you won't find elsewhere, and I give you tempting incentives as a patron. That's patreon.com/onthewineroad. Patreon is Patreon. Thank you for your continued support and keeping me company on the Wine Road.